Hi everyone, welcome to yet another episode of All About Scale podcast. I'm your host Vidhi Chugh, an AI strategist and a digital transformist. Today's guest is an analytics leader on a mission to democratize machine learning. He's deeply committed to making AI safe and reliable by designing innovative solutions. Chief scientist at Siemens, none other than Michael Taylor. In this episode, Michael talks about the hype around AI and why is it really important to understand what AI is capable of. He also explains the key components of designing an effective AI strategy. But before you go ahead and absorb this power packed episode, let me share the key theme of this episode, where Michael explains the mindset shift required to take the POC to the last mile delivery. So grab your coffee and headphones and let's dive in. Hi, Michael. It's great to have you on the show. I'm really excited to discuss all things scale with you, especially in regard to how you build the funnel of choosing the right AI project from a business lens. But before we go deep into the technical discussion, I'm curious to know your journey into the world of analytics. I see that you have taught maths and stats in your early years, which laid down the foundation of ML space. So, was it the first time that you felt analytics is the next organic step in your career?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm really very excited to be on your show, and I'm looking forward to share some of my thoughts and experiences along the way. Yes, I know, as you rightly said, I started off my journey at least as a research teaching assistant in university back in Africa, after graduating with statistics and mathematics. And so my first exposure to the whole world of analytics was when I was doing kind of research for a telecommunication company back then, long time ago, where I was required to, or my interest was really on how to understand telecommunication within the mobile network itself. How the plant repeaters, how telecommunication flow between multiple nodes, and then how you try to visualize that into kind of a graph network, and then applying to mathematics to actually solve that kind of a problem in terms of redundancy and telecommunication networks. So that was like my first exposure, at least, to business problem, and then applying mathematics to really solve that. And so that actually motivated me to pursue a kind of degree later on in operational research, where I tried to really broaden my understanding about the business world and how to solve business problems using mathematics.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks for sharing it with us. It does sound like a great success story. Michael, when I look back on my career, I find there have been some defining moments that have shaped my career into where it is today. Be it in terms of picking the right job or choosing a right role at a specific organization, or just simply being assigned a tough and challenging AI task. So those certain but yet very impactful projects, they've made a big difference in how I overall think about and maybe work on AI solutions. They've shaped the way I approach those solutions, right? So I'm sure you would also have experienced something similar. So, what would be that one breakthrough moment that has changed the trajectory of your career?
Yeah, I think that is really a very good question. I know, as I start to think about my own journey, as I said, I'm right in the university, and I'm working, with this telecommunication company, and trying to figure out exactly how you apply that. So that was like, for me, like the first point, well, I would say, where like I have an exposure to understand like the things I do in the classroom, all the things I've learned in theory perhaps are also very applicable in the business. So then I then begin to see that maybe I don't need to be an academic guy, somebody who just doing there to study mathematics and just teach, but some of these things can be applied. So that was like my first kind of aha moment. I say, this thing is really applicable and useful in the business. But being born and raised in Africa, I had to migrate to the UK, and this is where I started studying. I think my first breakthrough, I will say, came when I was working for a media company in the UK. And at the start of my career, I started off as a kind of right from the beginning as an analyst. I'm doing data mining and looking at data and try to make sense out of that to give insights to different business stakeholders. So one day, my boss, because she knew that I had some background in statistics and mathematics, and then she said, "Yeah, we have some problem that requires us to predict some behavior of our customers in terms of churn." And that was like the very first time I'm hearing this word churn, and that was the first time I see that you can really apply mathematics statistics for prediction. You can actually take data and try to predict the behavior of certain people. So she gave me this project, which was kind of very interesting for me, and then going back into the data and begin to apply statistical models, machine learning models, like, from basic regression, logistic regressions, for vector machines. So like that was like the for me, like the really the pivotal moment for me, where I see that, wow, I think you can really take some of these things you've learned and understand data to be able to predict behavior of people in that sense, which could then lead to an outcome that can benefit the customer or the business as a whole. So that really sparked an interest in me in terms of like really machine learning. So then started really understanding machine learning. So that really like was a turning point for me in terms of my next role, because when I went to Visa as well, my whole interest around predictive analytics, prescriptive analytics became like the foundation of my motivation. And that has led to me to all the things I'm doing today has been centered around really how you look at data and then try to predict whether the machine is going to fail in the next 24 hours, or whether it is trying to understand anomalies or form of kind of deterioration of asset or whatever it is. So I would say that was for me the big hua moment and a turning point for me that really motivated me to aspire for much more bigger roles in AI machine learning.
Yeah, that's really great. I actually enjoy these attribution models that when you look back in the past and you kind of trace it back to that one particular moment in your past has played a critical role in how you overall think about AI and the kind of impact that it can create in your work today. So that's spectacular. And one thing that amazes me today is the rate at which AI has enabled the innovations around us. So there has been a huge increase in possibilities in the world of technology ever since we've seen AI entering into this space. I see it everywhere, be it edtech, retail space, agriculture, or fintech. So people say that there is AI buzz going around, but how do you overall see this enthusiasm surrounding AI? And maybe what are the key trends and path-breaking innovations that you see are going to come from AI?
No, I think as a practitioner myself, it's somebody who has spent a huge portion of his life really trying to understand this technology and also leveraging this technology to solve business problem. It brings some level of excitement when I see the buzz around it. Like, people are really excited about the technology. People are really excited about what AI can actually do, how it can support society, how it can really help to address some of the very challenging problems that we have today in our world, whether it is urbanization, whether it is sustainability, whether it is digital transformation. So you can really see that the world as we see it today has tremendous challenges in a way. And at least from where I'm standing, I can see that this technology really has tremendous impact to really shape and help to solve some of these bigger problems that we have. So in a way, I'm very excited about it. Even though sometimes the buzz, in a way, also has a lot of hype around that, because many people don't really understand it in terms of like how it is used or how it could be used. And also the application areas. For example, if you look at Chat GPT now, like that really made people to really understand, what AI can do. And this technology has also provoked a lot of discussions around the ethics around that. So how to really ensure that people are using these technologies for the right way. So in a way, I'm very excited about the buzz, but at least with a lot of caution as well, that people should understand how it is used, and to use that in a very safe way. In terms of areas that I see, as you mentioned, I think for me, I'm very much excited about just the ongoing democratization of AI itself. How we're actually using this technology to solve human problems. Using some of these technologies to improve. To develop smart devices, which are also very helpful to human beings. I think that's one part that I'm excited about. I'm looking forward to see exactly how we progress in a particular area. And I just mentioned about Chat GPT. At least all the discussions around generative AI as well is very exciting, because you can see the direct impact to humans. Whether it is speech to speech translation, whether it's from speech to image, and all of these different things surrounding how AI can help with this type of support, whether it is customer services or doing some diagnostics in my field, for example. So the whole idea of the generative AI, I think it's very exciting. Of course, another thing that is exciting to me as well, which I'm also watching the space very, very closely, is that all around this kind of augmented working, for example. How AI tools or applications can be used for 3D printing, for example, augmented reality. Now we're talking a lot about the metaverse, which is whether from the perspective of Facebook or even from the manufacturing side of things. So we have our own narrative of what the metaverse actually means and how we are actually using some of these technologies to support us along this journey. I think these are some of the interesting things that at least excites me. But as a practitioner as well, the thing that also excites me quite a bit or quite a lot is that I'm seeing a lot of course, some of these things has been, they're not new, but I think people are becoming very aware of some of the limitations of machine learning as we know it today. Because as we know that when it comes to machine learning, at least some of the fundamental assumptions is around this IID assumption that we make that, whatever we want to predict in the future has to be based on whatever the past has been. So the past and the future has to be related, correlated together at least. But then the challenge is that when you put models into production, you begin to see that if the future deviates from the past, then of course all the models are completely all over the place. They are no longer accurate, or the performance drops very significantly. So the whole idea around causal ML, domain adaptation, and domain generalization, this kind of ideas, at least in the AI space, is something that personally for me is very exciting, which I'm spending a lot of time into, because some of the work that I do, at least some of these technologies or ideas are going to be very, very, very useful, at least in the future. So these are some of the things that excites me, and I'm looking forward to see exactly where it goes and then how I can contribute to that.
Yeah, I think like two sides of the coin, where you see from one side there's a lot of AI enthusiasm, but like you correctly mentioned, the awareness part of it is, I think, still missing. Like you really can't expect that because I have enough data, I can just feed into the algorithms and there would be a magic coming out of it. So that's not going to happen. And I've personally seen in my career as well that it requires a lot of awareness, or maybe you need to educate and make everyone being ML aware of what is the potential that you can really reap benefits from, and what are its limitations and challenges. So you really can't expect algorithm to work on everything and anything, right? Not every data or every use case is possible with AI. So that certain other side of the coin is where the AI fatigue sets in, where you try n number of things and hardly very few of them really go down the funnel. But having said that, I think that's really an interesting space and time to be in the field of AI.
No, there is. There is. You mentioned something about the awareness, the fatigue, and also understanding, because for some of us that are practitioners and have to deal with customers, across different domains, that is the one thing that I see that many people are still not properly educated yet about these technologies and what it can do. You mentioned the word magic, that people think that AI is magic. I used to have some customers that would just tell me, yeah, just put in the data and run it on the machine and then get that. And say, but yeah, why the performance is not 100% and stuff like that. So they don't really understand the mechanics of even what an AI model really is. What is the contribution of data, all data management, data quality, how significant all of these things is. How is also very important as well to really understand, to have a kind of a strategy within the organization itself about, what are the problems we really need to solve, and how this technology can really support us. Because if you don't have a strategy or an idea from the organization point of view, then we always see that this is always a disaster. So why some of these things fail in the future? So that is always a very good point.
Yeah, and I think you correctly mentioned about strategy. So and I'm seeing these words coming now and used being more frequently these days, is AI strategy, there's data strategy, then you have a business strategy. So specifically with regards to AI strategy, I think it requires you to cover all the angles possible. Like you correctly mentioned, you assume that data is there and you feed in, and but what comes out, if you're not really able to interpret or understand it, right? Then nobody's going to use it. So it's just lying there as a campaign or agenda for your organization. But nobody's able to act on it, and that's where explainability comes into the picture, which I think has seen a lot of traction in the recent years. So that's one thing. And AI ethics, I think you briefly touched upon this, that you've made everything, it's working fine, but its impact on the society, if it is not gauged positively, then that's not going to hit into production. So these are angles, I think, when an AI strategist is devising which are the use cases you really need to work on, I think they top the chart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they do. I think these are, you know, I know a lot of people understand all this. When you read the literature, you always see, 70% or 80% depends on the literature you're reading. So, 70% of this project are failing. Fundamentally, it's because of these things. Not really having a proper strategy around that. Not dealing with the ethical aspect of it, the interpretability or the explainability of that. You can come up with something that is really, really awesome, but if nobody really understands that, or if it's not really addressing any problem, or even the whole idea of how you move from a POC into production, because there is one thing to come up with a good model, but we all know that by just doing a POC in itself is not really creating any value for anyone. So, but the operationalization of this technology requires a new way of thinking. It requires a new architecture, a new technology in a way. So, how do you deal with kind of a last mile? How do you turn that insight now into value? So it takes a lot of thinking. It takes a lot of thought and the right strategy around that. So it is more than just getting a data and just building an AI model, but looking at it end to end and the whole application, how from the data itself, how it flows into the value itself. I think that end to end chain needs to be properly thought through. Otherwise, we just be one of the statistics again as failing.
Absolutely, so true. And I think that's a really valid point. And
Mm.
what I'm seeing is that organizations have been collecting data for a long time. They are coming up with very interesting use cases, like because I'm seeing that
Mm.
there is a significant focus on customer and what are their preferences, that they are trying to keep up with the changing dynamics of customer needs. And COVID has taught us all of these, right? But there are multiple ideas and some projects which are having a potential of being a blockbuster once, like they can really make things work for your organization. But out of all those potentially good ideas, how do you find the high impact AI enabled initiatives? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's for me it always starts with this simple question about the value itself. What is this tool going to do for us, or what do we want this tool to do? Because in terms of high value or value creation, for me it depends on the benefit of the application itself. So and identifying those high valued ones, first of all, you have to start with them. I start with them, maybe defining from the organization point of view, like what are the key decisions, first of all, that we really want to make as an organization in a way. And what are the insights that are required to make those type of decisions? And then what type of analytics? It could be diagnostic, it could be descriptive, it could be predictive, it could be prescriptive analytics. Then you talk about the data and the technology. So if you start off with really the understanding that there's a business problem, there's a business case, there's something that you want to do with that, and then you begin to think backwards, then you know that at the end of the day, whatever I create is going to lead to value in that sense. So that's for me the one way I start. But at least from the value part as well, you cannot create value if you really don't operationalize or embed this particular analytics within the organization itself to begin to change some of the processes and the way we do things within the organization. So so another dimension for me would be perhaps ensuring that whatever I'm doing is not going to be like a one-off thing, but it is something that can have like a long-time impact, operationalized and put into production that can continuously serve the business going forward. But also perhaps you can say if you have a business that have like multiple verticals, for example, then you want to think about, can I create something in this vertical but can also be extended or be applied into different domains, for example. And I mentioned earlier on about this whole idea of domain adaptation and domain generalization, because this is really where the kind of scaling aspect comes in, because like I can develop one thing here, but then can I adapt it to a different environment, to the different domains, or to the different verticals in that sense? So how generalizable do I need to make that? So developing that with that kind of a mindset helps you to think about the right technology, the right type of analytics, or the right type of AI that I need to have to be able to achieve that. So these are the ways. So in terms of really identifying high value, so one for me would be from the business perspective, like what is the business value we want to create, and what are the high value tickets that we think that if we move the needle by just 1 percentage point, will have some significant impact on the business itself. Rather than you can do something small and have a very good predictive capability, but maybe the impact is really, really small in that. And because, as I mentioned earlier on, operationalization of this technology in itself requires a lot of effort, requires a lot of a different tech stack that you need to have. Perhaps also it's also very expensive to do that. So you want always to ensure that at least your return on investment as well is something that you can think about when you identify this type of project that you want to work on.
Yeah, I think that's true because our aim objective is to have a high impact, high value project. But what I really like from your conversation is to have the domain adaptation part, which is, I think, loosely connected with reusability. Can you literally scale it up across the verticals?
Yeah.
Because what I see is that there could be a project which you start with a particular use case in mind, but you have the potential roadmap that it can scale to multiple verticals. So it then starts acting as a horizontal, which is serving across multiple business units. I think that's the good way to scale your project. Yeah,
I think these are things that you need to think about. You're right. Is that I think adaptation, generalization, or how do I reuse this? How do I build something once but then reuse that? So then you have the what will come to mind for me will be like how do you standardize some of this, because AI in itself, or the way to develop an AI model is very iterative, and sometimes you have very distinct steps that you have to follow to that.
Yeah.
So the degree to which you standardize these processes can also help in terms of like with your reusability in a way. And also think about maybe some things like MLOps can also help to standardize some of these processes. Take leverage some technologies around like semantic layer, for example, where you can aggregate insight or feature stores from the analytics perspective. So anything that you can do that can help you to standardize, can reuse, can aggregate, can disconnect between your front end and your back end. And that can also help you to democratize and scale very, 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 very easily. So these are perhaps some of the things that one needs to think about when you want to think about scaling or moving across many verticals, standardizing some of these processes, having some of the tools that can help you to democratize your insight across the organization at scale.
Yeah, I really like your point, Michael, because I'm a person of processes. Immediately I enter into any new organization when I change job. I look for, what are the key areas where I can, standardize the process, save a lot of time, because AI projects specifically, like you also mentioned, are very iterative by nature, and they take, the experiment space is so vast, and it is very time expensive to make one successful AI project. And, seeing it to fruition, like you correctly mentioned, seeing it from end to end, getting into the data, and then seeing the results coming out of it, making a business impact. So if we are able to make one as successful, what my next immediate step is to look for areas where this repeatability, which is, which can be automated, standardized, and, regulated across. Because what I want is that everybody should be on the same page, understanding the processes, and don't literally need to look for things all over the place, like you also mentioned at one point. So that's a good way to approach.
I think from the developer's perspective, we know that this transparency, reusability, standardizing this process, is very key, because it's one benefit is that it also makes everybody to have the same way of working, at least across the organization. It standardizes the way of working in that. So it's very, very easy, at least to to do things within the organization, especially if you're onboarding as well. It's also very easy to onboard people when you have like very standard processes, things that people should follow as well. So there is a lot of benefits, when it comes to really ensuring that you have very standard processes. You can take whether you have tools that can help you to do that, or just following some best practices, whether you're applying safe within your organization, or Scrum, or Kanban, or whatever kind of an agile framework you're applying. So all of these things helps to at least standardize and streamline the approach within the enterprise.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael, for that. And I see that it is this business understanding about what projects are we working on and what is the end goal and objective of it. These are, I think, often missing or not really well communicated within the teams who are working on a project. So what I see is everybody is very Jira oriented. You have a ticket assigned to you and you're working on that. Maybe you're not really aware of how it all ties back together. It's kind of called as working in silos. But this gap of not knowing the end goal and objective, I think hinders the success of a project, which brings me to my next favorite topic of
Mm,
how ML teams should collaborate. So data projects, as you also know, that require extensive cross collaboration. You
mm, mm.
mentioned that different stakeholders, engineering, sciences, analytics. So in your experience, how do you align or maybe enable easy effective collaboration across the teams?
Yeah, I think that's a very very good question, and something that I see even in my current company that we also struggle with that. And especially you mentioned like many team members don't understand the big picture in terms of what they are doing. They're only concentrating on what is the next ticket, what is the next story I need to be working on. I'm just looking at the backlog and just drawing things. So somebody once said it's like many teams are like like a feature factory. We are just like just turning out some of these things, and that has for me I think it has to do with the culture and the organization itself in terms of how we work in a way. So agile processes, all of these things are very great, but I think this is some of the things that if you don't go according to the principles, you miss quite a lot, and then you're just stuck with all of these processes that sometimes and makes people to be like that, where they don't understand anything. We're just turning because we have metrics like what is going to be the flow, or how many Jira tickets I've closed within the sprint, for example. What is the burnout rate? But nobody really thinks about the outcome or the value in that sense. So the way that I tend to go about this is that, of course, it also depends on how teams are structured. Some teams are structured in a matrix way. Some teams, they have like whether it's as a pod or like a COC. So all of this will have some implications in terms of like how people collaborate in a way. So like in my current project, what we do is that depending on based on the way that we are delivering the project, so we have like multiple applications that we are developing. So for each of these applications, like we will have like a software lead, or we call like implementation lead, for example, that is responsible for that particular application, and then try to put all the different people that are necessary to deliver that. The data scientist, the data engineer, the BI developer, and then perhaps you may have certain roles that may cut across multiple of these functions, like the tester, for example, or and the DevOps engineer, for example. So this way, you ensure that all of these teams at least will have everything that it's required to deliver that particular application. But also ensuring that maybe as also like as a batch lead, like with me, like in my team, I have multiple roles that I play. Like one of the things I always do is that before the start of every project, we try to ensure that at least people understand the why of what we are doing, because that is always very critical as to understanding the business problem. What is the business problem? Why are we developing these features? So what is the significance of the features that we are building? How do they contribute to the bigger picture? And how is this also related to the customer problem that we are solving? In many ways, we also like co-create with the customer as well. So we always have the customer in interaction and this kind of continuous feedback that gives us this kind of easy access to understanding what we are doing is right or wrong, and then how to iterate very quickly on those things. But I think one way is that it's kind of collaboration. We have everybody that is required to support the particular application, ensuring that people have understand the why of what we are trying to do, and make sure that everybody understands that in a way. And of course, how everybody's task is very, 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 very tied to what everybody else is doing. So I think these are, there are many ways, but these are some of the things that I see, or I do at least in my organization, that helps this kind of a continuous interaction. Of course, you can do other things as well to continue to increase the bonding by having like team events. We go to lunch together, like with my team, for example. We go to the gym together. So we always have these kind of informal kind of interactions already that and breaks down all of these different tensions. Or so we see ourselves like buddies, or very good teammates that we can talk about anything. We also have like paper reading sessions with like every 2 weeks, where like we will identify an AI paper. We go and we look at the technical details, we discuss, we interact, we challenge each other's ideas, and then we try to figure out, okay, which idea in this paper can then be used in our upcoming project or in the project that we are doing, and see exactly how we can adapt that. So these are some of the little things that I see that I would say helps with this collaboration and helps with at least kind of teamwork or team building.
Yeah, I really like your approach, Michael. Like, I know that there is no one answer to these kind of
Yeah,
things because, like you
yeah.
correctly mentioned, at some point it comes from the culture of the organization because you processes and all those things are waste if it is not rooted in your culture. And like little things that you mentioned, like focusing on the big picture and explaining the why part of the project to your team members, I think this is the crucial thing that you're doing in your teams right now. It's very effective way to ensure 360-degree feedback. I'm a
Yeah,
person of 360-degree feedback. I
yeah,
explain something and then I
yeah.
constantly solicit feedback. What is the next possible thing that you think we
Mm,
can do better? And is there a better approach to this particular solution? And then, this leads to,
mm.
faster product cycles. So we are able to iterate faster and deliver faster with this approach. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good because I'm also a very strong believer of having empowered teams in a way, because one other way to really foster collaboration is that really empower the team to own the problem they are solving. What do I mean by that? Sometimes, of course, like again, as I mentioned, like if you really go into deep into the agile processes and then forget about the principles, then you always have these challenges that you have to deal with. Because then people are always focused on features, getting these right things and not really owning that. But in the last year or so, and I've been spending a lot of time really understanding product development, product management, and really understanding the literature around those things, and try to understand like how other successful companies like the Google, Amazon, and Facebook, eBay, and how really, why are these companies really successful in product development? But one of the things I constantly see is that they are not really, yes, they might be following some of the principles of this coming from agile principles or whatever it is, but they are not very dogmatic with, okay, we are doing agile or whatever it is, because they really have this kind of an empowered team kind of a culture where like teams really they have a problem to solve, and then you go and figure out exactly how to solve that. So that's your part. So you just have to figure out how to solve it. I just give you a problem. I tell you exactly what
Yeah.
kind of outcome I want to achieve, and then you figure it out. I'm not going to tell you how to. That's why you're the expert. So as a product owner or the product manager, get your team and then try to figure out. So that way I see that when people own what they are doing, they become motivated, they become excited, and that really also fosters a very strong collaboration in terms of what they do.
Yeah, actually, that's a great way to put it because when you are empowering them, and like you correctly mentioned in terms of democratizing, that you're removing the boundaries, you're not literally hand-holding them to, I'm giving you the problem and I'm giving you the particular path you have to follow to, reap the benefits of the solution that's going to come out of it. I think that's a good way when there are no boundaries and you are, there's an ownership of the solution that the team is developing. It really makes a good impact on the project. And now my last question is very different and is the one that I've been asked many times already. And it's because maybe I've been a part of mentor circles where a common theme among aspiring data scientists is that they're coming from different genres. Some are coming from academic, some are from non-profit or government sectors, and then they enter into the industry. And what difference specifically do you see between academics and industry from purely from the perspective of applied sciences?
Yeah, that is also something that I deal with all the time, because I also do mentor people, and also, at least as I mentioned earlier on, my career also started from the university as well, being a researcher myself, and then transitioning into academic into the business. And I definitely relate to some of the at least in my own experience, some of the challenges that I found, and how that really impacted me, and how did I transition or change my mindset, at least in a way. So one of the key differences that I see is that, of course, when you're in academia, of course, when you're doing research or whatever it is, you always have a different mindset about, you're very much theoretical in terms of what you're doing. So whether what you're doing at least is something that can be deployed or can be used, I really don't care too much about that. So it's more about maybe the performance, or maybe I'm just very eager about maybe beating by some percentage point by some benchmark statistics that's already there. So that excites me, and I can publish a paper and say, yep, I did this technique, and then I beat the benchmark by 2 percentage point, and oh, my method is great in that way. But many times, like so when people are moving from academia into the industry, they come with this kind of the different mindset. They think that they have the expectation that everything is fine. I have a good data. I have clean data. Everything is just rosy. It's just about just applying the technique. in that. So that is one thing. So they have the expectation that they have good quality data. So it's just about applying techniques. Then the other thing that I see as well is that they are always very focused on the theory part of what they are doing. And so just very theoretical minded. In itself, it's very good when you understand a theory, because I do as well. I understand the technical details of every application I'm building or every AI technology. So it's very nice to understand those things, because when you understand them, it's very easy to explain, and also easy to know exactly when things are not working as they should be in a way. Because like one of the areas which is of interest to me at the moment is that when you talk about ChatGPT or this kind of generative AI, if you look at the technology around ChatGPT, is that how they're combining reinforcement learning, at least with the human feedback in a way. And one of the challenges they try to solve with this is that how to ensure that what we've programmed the computers or the AI to do is really what we wanted them to do, in terms of matching the objective of the AI tool itself with the objective of the user itself. So meaning that if you take a step back, you realize that for every machine learning algorithm that you build, there's always a loss function which is related to the objective that the machine learning is trying to do, whether to minimize or maximize an objective function. And many times this objective function is also contrary to the objective of the user. So whether in terms of how we validate those models, for example, which is not perhaps kind of aligned, which has led to this, what we call like now the alignment problem. So the point here is that if you don't really understand these nuances in terms of like the algorithm itself, what is the role of this loss function, what does hyperparameter do to that? How do you set the right hyperparameters, and how do they affect or align? How do they need to be aligned with the objective of the user itself? Then you may not be able to make the right choices of the algorithm, for example. So the theoretical understanding is also very vital, but having that kind of a balance to understand that, and sometimes in the industry you have to think completely differently and see exactly how you adapt those things to the problem you're trying to solve. So these are some of the challenges that I see. So my advice always is that when you come to the industry, first of all, you have to change your mindset, moving away from the theoretical stuff and say, my goal is about problem solving. I don't care too much about the algorithm. I'm not obsessed by algorithm. I'm not obsessed by the technology. Yes, I know them. I want to know them. But my goal, first of all, is about solving the problem. And solving this problem, sometimes it might require me to apply some basic rules, some if and then rule, for example, or something as simple as logistic regression, or something as very complex as COVNET, whatever it is. So it is the problem that dictates what I need to do. So I'm obsessed with the problem. So first of all, be obsessed with the problem, and then all other things then will follow.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, Michael, because what I see is that generally when we are dealt with a business problem, the way I see it is that you need to convert a business problem into a statistical problem and design a solution where still your theory can play a big role, that you are aware of what all buffet of algorithms you have in your plate, but you're using them as a means to an end and not really getting stuck with those algorithms, that because I think I have enough data, I'll use neural networks. If I'm constrained with data, then I'll need to go looking for quality data, and then where frugality as a data scientist will come out. And then the other part of the coin of the side is that where you have a statistical solution ready and it's working fine, it's giving you predictions, and maybe in terms of accuracy it is really good algorithm. But when you put it into a business perspective, when you have to actually see the impact of it, whether it's meeting the stated goals or not, and that's where you need to be really agile of not getting stuck into those technologies or tools like you mentioned, but being looking at and calibrating back your approach, seeing that it's not meeting the goals and what exactly do I need to change in the AI ML pipeline. So it all ties back to having a first putting the problem statement or the business problem at the forefront, and then taking it backwards to the solution that best does the justice to it.
Yeah, exactly. Because you mentioned one point, I think, which is very, very important. Yes, the statistics plays a lot, because if you understand it, then it helps you, because when you're translating from the business to the analytics problem, then having an understanding of what is there. So I usually say, like, all of these things, I'm like like, this is like in my toolbox. In my toolbox,
yes,
I may have like a spanner, a hammer, or a screwdriver, whatever it is, and I can take them depending on the task that I have. But I'm aware that they are there. I know how to use them, but I can just draw upon them. But the interesting thing also that you said, which I think is also important, is that the business problem can also and the context can also help you to regulate in terms of the application that you want to use. Because if I'm thinking in a business context, the ethical aspect is important, the explainability aspect is important, the interpretability aspect is important. So sometimes you may come up with a good model that performance-wise is good, but nobody really understands that, and it's not also very actionable in many ways. Because this is also something that I see that in the business that we are obsessed and focused on prediction. But prediction without inference, for me, I always see that you cannot do a prediction without inference, because the inference is really about the actions that I actually do or make with the predictions that I have that leads to the kind of value in that way. So I'm not really interested. I'm interested in about the performance of the model, but it's also about what kind of inference do I need to draw or conclusion I need to draw from this model itself. The features that fit into my model also have a lot of interesting insight that they can give to me. So my point is that if you have something very good, but it's not really, somebody cannot really understand it or use that, then it's very useful. So you have to do the kind of trade-off most of the time based on the business context and the application itself, and then see exactly how you have this how to make the best trade-off.
Yeah. And I think these trade-offs is what is the theme of this podcast as well, which is all about scale, that you really have to make those pragmatic system design choices in terms of while building those pipelines, that we don't really think that the model is only good if it is giving a certain percent performance, right? Because performance is also now twofold. One is that it actually has to perform good and give a good prediction. But another, sometimes one case that I particularly seen in my career is that there was an algorithm, it was doing good on POC level, but the moment you have to put it in production, it's not able to scale. The inference time is too high that the users just can't wait for it. And then the entire engineering team has to work backwards, saying how can we make it work fast. So these kind of things I think are important now these days to look into the POC angle as well, that when you're developing a proof of concept around that, you need to see that whether that algorithm itself also can scale, not just the system. Yeah.
No, I think that's the thing. So that's why I always advise that whenever you embark, before you start and doing POC, at least have an idea of exactly how the end-to-end of that particular solution. Assuming that the POC is going to work, you're going to have something, but then how do you move from the POC and scaling that? Because this is what, as we discussed before, putting things into production requires a whole new way of thinking. Requires additional skill set. It requires a new tech stack. If your runtime or your data frequency is completely all over the place, if you're getting data maybe once every 3 months, then it's not going to be useful. But if you're also getting data in near real time, then that means that then you need to have a system that can accommodate that, and this kind of a fast inference. But also, how soon is the user going to get the alerts or the alarms or the recommendations from the analytical model itself to be able to make decision as well, and then having this whole feedback loop completely connected together. So you really have to think about all of these things. Otherwise, I think it's going to be very difficult for you to scale that.
Yes, and that's true, because that's, I think, no wonder machine learning engineer roles are trending these days. Because they have a know-how of how to scale it up, and they have the system understanding where they take the model from the development team and can really do those painful work that is actually required to operate and put that model into production and have those inferences coming out. Yeah.
But I think also I think it's also an organizational problem as well. At least in my experience, many leaders within organizations don't really understand the machine learning life cycle in a way. So from the organization perspective, the IT infrastructure cannot really support the operationalization of models in many ways. So I think in as much as the data engineer can, from the developer's perspective, we need to think about that. But also, I think from the organization as well, they also need to understand that there is more to just building a model. If the goal should not be just building a model. So as we just discussed, the goal should be about the value, the business problems that we are trying to solve. So how do we use the output of the model to make the decisions which create the value that we want? So that then means that you have to think about it, the entire life cycle, from the data, from the business problem to the data, to the development, to the deployment, to the personalization and management. Because even, you mentioned something earlier on about even there's no guarantee that what I've built now is going to work when I put that into the wild. Example,
Yeah.
I've had many instances where like you have very good performance in the training and validation set, and when you put things into deployment, maybe the first month your performance completely is all over the place. So this kind of constant monitoring of the application itself in production and the whole retraining of that in itself. So you can begin to see exactly how why it's complicated. It's not only about building it, but the monitoring, the management, and the maintenance of that particular model to ensure that at least everything is working as they should. It's not
Yes, absolutely.
an easy thing.
Yeah, it is actually not, because I think the
Mm,
earlier the organizations used to have a perspective of building a working model. A working
mm,
model was good enough that it's able to give the predictions also.
yeah.
But when you are about to put it into production, there are n number of things that can go wrong. Some of them that you already mentioned, and I've
Mm,
seen often MLE teams or ML ops side of the team. They're always in the firefighting mode, because if
yeah.
something is going wrong, you're like, at one point you mentioned that data distribution changes and it ought to change very fast, because now the rapid digitalization is
Mm,
making customer behavior also changing
mm,
accordingly. So when these kind of changes happen, you really need to have that complete feedback loop and see why it is not making sense as it was when we were developing the model. And that again, spurs the chain of carrying out multiple experiments, importing that deviations into your local environment, and seeing what exactly do I need to change in or tweak in my model now. So I think now we have moved from just having a working model to a model which is actually creating value for us. So
yeah.
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 uh, yeah. Thanks, Michael, for taking the time to come on the show and share those powerful nuggets with us. I'm sure they are very valuable for me and for the audience who are going to listen to the show as well. It's been an absolute pleasure.